Thank you very much, Pernilla. It's a pleasure to be here. And I will speak about the European Research Council. So, the European Research Council, or ERC, started in 2007, which was then part of the Framework Program 7. And the Secretariat is present in Brussels in this oval-shaped glass building. The top 5 stores are ERC. So the aims of ERC is to enforce frontier research in Europe. This involves 3 words starting with R: retain, repatriate, and recruit. We want to retain excellence in Europe. We want to repatriate European scientists who have left Europe, for instance, to make a postdoctoral training outside Europe, to come back to Europe. And we want also to recruit scientists, excellent scientists from outside Europe to come to Europe and do their research here. This is how America has become so dominant after the Second World War. Many of the excellent scientists in the US are not actually born there, but recruited from elsewhere in the world. We also want to raise the level of ambition. We want European scientists to compete at the European level. And much as Champions League in football raises the ambition and excellence of football, we think that ERC will also be able to raise the ambition of science. We want to establish a model for research funding. We have a good one here in Sweden, but in many European countries this is not so perfect, and we want ERC to be a model to follow. We also want ERC to complement other European EU support programs for research. There are already others, as you know, more applied research, training and mobility, and infrastructure. We want ERC to be focusing on basic research and complement the others. We also want ERC to complement national support for basic research. You should remember that only 5% of the research support comes from EU and 95% from the nations. So the strategy is to keep it simple, flexible, and focused. There's absolutely no need to reinvent the wheel. We only want to distribute research money to the best scientists for them to develop their ideas. We want to support individual, young, mid-term, and experienced scientists. And we want to promote excellence irrespective of nationality, age, or field. And excellence is, in fact, the only evaluation criteria when we evaluate grant applications. There is no other criteria that has to be fulfilled. Collaborations are neither enforced nor discouraged, and grants are flexible and portable. If the scientist leaves his host institute, the money goes with him or her. And we want to encourage interdisciplinarity because we think that's where the major breakthroughs in the future will be made. So the structure of ERC is really standing on 3 legs. The European Commission, which provides the financing. So ERC is part of the Commission, but has a certain autonomy. And this is guaranteed by the European Commission. And then we have the Scientific Council, which consists of 22 scientists, including myself. We are appointed by the Commission, and we then establish the overall scientific strategy, and we control the quality of the operations and the management, and to also ensure the communication with the scientific community. And the picture you can see there is from our first meeting in October 2005. Out of the 22, now only me and Pavel Exner, a mathematician from Prague, remains. Everyone else has been replaced, and we will also be replaced towards the end of this year. This is a staggered procedure to renew the Scientific Council. And then the ERC agency in Brussels then executes the work program and implements the calls for proposals and organizes the peer review evaluation. Should say, though, that those who sit on the panels are recruited by us on the Scientific Council because we want the best scientists to do this job. And that is, as we see it, a very, very important criterion for the credibility of ERC. The budget of ERC for the Framework Program 7 was 7.5 billion euro, and now it has increased by 76% to 13.1 billion, which is good, of course. And we have now 17% of the overall support to research compared to 15% during the last Framework Program. But everything is not completely rosy, because this shows how the budget for ERC has increased from the start in 2007. And you will notice from this slide that although overall, we will have more money for the coming 7 years. For this year and the 2 coming years, the budget will actually be lower than for 2013. So despite the fact that ERC receives more and more applications and the competition is stiffer and stiffer, we will not receive enough money so that we can satisfy the needs for the coming years. We have focused on individual ERC grants, and more than 90% of the money has gone into this. There is no areas of research. If you have a project, you can apply for ERC to get money. If you're 2 to 7 years after your PhD, you can apply for a starting grant. You can get up to 1.5 million euro plus another €500,000 if you, for instance, move to Europe or if you need a very expensive piece of equipment. And the average or the normal length of grant is 5 years. Consolidated grants is for midterm researchers, 7 to 12 years after the PhD. They can get up to 2 plus 0.75 million euros for 5 years. And then advanced grants, they can get up to 2.5 million euros plus another million up to 5 years. So the applications are evaluated by a conventional peer review system using 25 thematic panels and covering then the whole scientific spectrum. Each one of the panels consists of 4 to 16 members. And since we have then 3 sets of each panel for the 3 calls and 2 sets because they serve only every 2nd year, we have in total now 150 panels with more than 2,000 people recruited to them. So the evaluation is in a 2-step procedure, and for the starters and consolidators, they're interviewed in step 2. This shows that ERC is there for you throughout your career, from you set up your first research group until you stop to be productive. The yellow bars here shows the starting and consolidated grants year by year, and the blue ones is those for advanced grants. You will also notice from this slide that we have deliberately given preference and priority to younger researchers. And this is deliberate because we think that this is where EU has been particularly deficient in the past. But you can also see that also when you're at reach the advanced stage, you can get a grant. And there is actually people up to 75 years of age who have had a grant, meaning that there is no upper limit. As you know, in Europe, scientists are forced to retirement at sometimes a ridiculous low age. And many of them move to the US to continue research for as long as they are productive and active. We want ERC to counteract this brain drain by not having an upper limit. You may ask, what about the success rate then? For the starting grants, the accumulated success rate is 9%. And as you can see, it's fairly even, regardless of what age you have when you apply. Those who are very old have a lower success rate, but these are also small numbers. For the advanced grant, you see a very similar pattern. Here, the overall success rate is 14%. And this is very similar throughout the ages people are when they apply. Again, these very small numbers for the higher ages. That's why it goes a little bit up and down. The number of applications has increased dramatically, as shown on this slide. So the starting and consolidator grants have gone up year by year and raised 48% only from 2012 to 2013. Also, the advanced grants has gone up to some extent. This means that although the average success rate was 9%, the success rate the last year was less. Because even though the budget increased, it didn't increase as much as the application pressure has done. So where do the grants go then? Well, this shows the countries that receive the grants. And obviously the bigger countries have most of them, the UK being in the leading position. More interesting here might be to look at where do the scientists come from, those who get the grants. And if you look at the red ones, these are sort of those who reside in their own country and do their research there. But the blue ones are those who have another passport compared to the country where they work. And the green ones are those nationals that work in another country. So in the case of UK, you can see that almost half of the ERC grantees in the UK are not British people. They are foreigners who come there to work. This is even more noticeable for Switzerland. I guess this reflects that these countries provide excellent facilities for scientists to work, to do their work, and they can then attract people from abroad. Then the green ones, Germany and Italy in particular, they lose people to other countries when they decide to do their work. Also something noticeable, and I think politicians have been very interested in these statistics. In the case of Sweden, as you can see, about a third of those who get the grants from Sweden comes from other countries. Also 17 Swedish people work outside to do their job. So Sweden are somewhere in between. I think it's a good sign that we have been able to recruit so many excellent scientists from abroad to come to work here. This is a good sign for Sweden. Overall, you see that Sweden is placing at number 9 in terms of who gets most of the grants. Of course, Sweden is a small country, so if you then take the population in account, Sweden is maybe number 4 or 5. Those who get most grant per million inhabitants are Israel and Switzerland and Holland, and then Sweden and the UK are about the same. So these are the host institutions in Sweden who got the grants. Not surprisingly, the major universities dominate. And you may say that there is sort of an injustice here. Some countries are more successful than others. Of course, there is a correlation to population, no surprise. There is also a correlation to the budget, the economy in each country, which is shown on this slide. So the higher budget overall, the gross national budget, the more ERC grants. So if you then compare EU 15, which is the traditional EU countries that are overall fairly successful, with EU 13, which is the other red square here, you see that, of course, EU 13, the new members are less successful, but they also have less economy, and that may explain part of the difference. And if you instead put in such a graph the amount of money each country spends on science, the correlation goes up from 0.81 to over 0.9. And if you then instead calculate the number of ERC grants compared to the publications within the 10% most cited papers, the correlation is 0.97%. No surprises here. And the lesson is, the more you invest in your own country for research, the higher chances that scientists from your country will be able to get an ERC grant. We do have another imbalance, which is maybe more worrisome, and that comes from the difference between men and women with regard to success rate. With regard to starting and consolidated grants, you can see on this slide that 30% were women who applied, but only 25% of those who got the grant was a woman. So there is a lower success rate for women, most noticeable in the LS domain, the life science domain, but also seen in the other domains. For the advanced grants, 15% of the applicants were women, but only 13% of those who got the grant were women. Again, a difference. We take these differences with a lot of seriousness, and we have devoted a lot of effort into really trying to understand why. So far, we haven't any indication that there is anything wrong with the evaluation system at ERC, which is, of course, our responsibility, and where we really are anxious that there should not be any discrimination. And we are continuously monitoring what is happening and trying to understand that. I cannot say that we have a definite answer yet. Then, in addition to these 3 major streams of calls, we have 2 more. One is proof of concept, and this is to help ERC grant holders to bridge the gap between their discoveries and the early stage of marketable innovation. We want ERC to fund frontier research, which in essence is basic research, but we don't want to make any distinction between basic research and applied research. And many of the applications from ERC contains aspects of both. And this type of grant is to help such scientists really to commercialize or to bring their discoveries towards application. It's up to 150,000 euro per grant, and it's evaluated in the 1 step. The last type of grant we have is called synergy grants. This was introduced 2012 and 2013 on an experimental basis. It is 2, 3, or 4 principal investigators coming together to solve a joint problem. They can get a lot of money for doing this ambitious task. We expect interdisciplinarity and that there will be a use of different type of approaches. And this is also one of the motivations to introduce this type of grant to start with, because we want ERC to promote interdisciplinary research. And we felt that we hadn't really succeeded on that part in the past. I should say that it's very important to realize these are not consortia, these are not collaborative projects. These are the same project addressed together by 2, 3, or 4 applicants. There will not be a synergy grant this year and not next year either, because we want to evaluate those and we want to do that first before we make a decision whether to continue. To come to the point here, what has ERC achieved? Well, 4,300 top researchers have been funded. They work in 600 institutions in 29 countries. Focus is on excellence, and this has been well received by the scientific community. High impact publications by ERC grantees have already appeared. And there is also national support programs. Some countries in Europe have taken the ranked list from ERC and provided funds for those who came right under the border for financing, and instead finance them from national sources. Again, reflecting the credibility that ERC has achieved. And also certain universities, especially invite ERC grantees. There is a sort of competition. They say, if you have an ERC grant, come to my university and we will give you a position. I think this is overall good. It sort of makes the university to come to their toes and try to make life agreeable to scientists and to make the best with regard to the scientific milieu at their host institutions. And the number of ERC grantees is a quality indicator for many universities. And this is, again, something that was not maybe anticipated when ERC started. But this has been now a quality mark when universities want to compare themselves to each other. Talking about publications, this shows the number of publications year by year that acknowledge ERC funding. Not surprisingly, the numbers goes up because, I mean, this is to be expected. But quantity is not the most important. Quality is, of course, the most important. So is there any indication that these publications are of any use? Well, if you investigate how often they are cited, and you instead ask how many of the ERC publications is in the top 1% cited articles, you will find that out of those published 2008, 9, and 10, 13% are in that category, which is an enormous overrepresentation. The average would be 1% then. So these are still small numbers, but at least it is encouraging, and we hope it reflects that the ERC is really producing excellent science. There has also been a lot of distinguished, or many of the ERC grantees have got distinguished prizes like Nobel Prizes and so forth, but honestly this was not because of the funding they got from ERC. It only shows that ERC was managed to pick them up in this application procedure. Should emphasize though that there is no guarantee to get an ERC grant if you have a strong track record long time ago. There are examples of Nobel Prize winners who has been rejected because they were felt not to have an interesting enough application. So this is my last slide, shows the ERC calls this year. The first one is a starting grant call, deadline March 25. Then we have a consolidated grant call, deadline May 20. And the advanced grant call, deadline October 21. And then there will be 2 calls for proof of concept. You will see from the budgets allocated that this will be a little bit more than 300 grants for starters and consolidators, but less so for the advanced grant, maybe 200. And this is for a pure technical reason. Because everything was sort of stopped and started again, everything is delayed this year, and there will simply not be time enough to deal with the advanced grant if they would be more than 200. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Carl-Henrik Heldin, also a founding father of ERC. Sweden doesn't have so many founding fathers when it comes to the EU, so here we have one of them. There has been a lot of questions actually on Twitter during your talk. One concerned how do we tackle the brain drain towards the US. There were many, but I picked up 2, and there were several of those. What is a definition? If excellent science, if excellence is the sole criteria, what is a definition? Could you define it so we know how to match your criteria?
Yeah, this is of course an important question and a difficult one to answer. I think it's a matter of convincing and impressing the evaluators who are serving on the panels and who themselves are excellent scientists, who have done something important in their scientific careers. So it boils down to what these people think are excellent science. That's the best I can do.
And as I said, it's not enough to be a Nobel Prize winner. You have to be topical and today the most excellent.
Exactly. So when we evaluate grants for advanced grantees, we look at the production, the 10 years that has passed. So if you were excellent 20 years ago, it doesn't help you. You have to be excellent now.
The gender gap or the gender challenge that you raised is also raised on Twitter, and many still would like to hear why. What is the reason, you think? And also looking at the Swedish statistics, that also Sweden as a member state is, we're all quite bad here in the EU, but Sweden is a little bit below the average, which might come as a surprise. Why is that, you think?
This is what we want to know, and we address this in a sort of humble way. We cannot say that we know yet. There are specific research programs that are focusing on this and try to pinpoint why this is the case. We have correlated it to the number of women on the panels that evaluate, number of chairs that are women on the panels, and all other statistics that you can think of, and nothing really correlates. We have also made it very clear to the evaluators that there is a discrepancy and you have to sort of make sure that you are not doing anyone injustice. And we have so far no real sign that the evaluation process as such is discriminating against women. What has come out though, and I think this is at least one of the factors that contributes, is that if you look outside the scientific sphere, it's clear that women get much less help from their husbands compared to the help the husbands get from their wives when it comes to taking care of their families, meaning in the end that men can devote more time to science than women can in our society.
So it's quite a lot a broader problem than within the ERC.
Yes, I think that's true. I'm not saying this is the only reason, but this is certainly one of the reasons that contributes.
Has to be tackled on many fronts, for sure. Thank you very much for your presentation. And I am now very happy to present the next speaker, who is the head of unit. Yes, a big applause. Thank you for reminding me.